May the words of my heart and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. It was interesting this morning as we were preparing to come in. I usually have a brief prayer with the choir and those who are in attendance, and I was sort of, I can feel it. I'm sort of in this kind of a fog this morning. And Allison reminded me that I needed to get in for the service, so we were a little late in getting in here because of that. And I've been trying to figure out what's going on. Now, this is going to be a really lame excuse, but I'm going to give it anyhow. I mean, it's hard for me to figure out whether this is Easter Sunday or the third Sunday after Easter. That's my lame excuse, but in some ways it's true. Because our gospel this morning still has us on Easter Day. This is the gospel from Luke this morning. We had the risen Lord in Mary Magdalene on Easter Day. Last week, we had the disciples first seeing Jesus come into their midst when they were locked in the room for fear of what might happen to them. And here we are in the Gospel of Luke, also taking place on that Sunday night. And they are there talking about what's been going on. Some of the disciples said that they had seen Jesus while they were on the road to Emmaus, and how he had sat with them, and when he broke bread in their midst, they knew it was him. And so they're trying to figure out what is going on, and Jesus appears in their midst. And they don't go to him and say, "Hey, welcome back, it's awful nice to see you." They are frightened to death. Some of them think he's a ghost. Come among them. And he tells them, "Peace, be at peace. Do not be afraid. It's me. Look at me. See who it is. Touch me if you have to." And then in this most human of ways, he says, "By the way, have you got anything to eat?" And so begins this encounter with the risen Lord in their midst. Well, I'm going to tell you a secret that most priests will never ever tell you. It's what they tell us in seminary, okay? They say, after you preach on Easter, take a week or two off so that you don't have to be around to preach again on the resurrection, because it's damn difficult to do. Well, no, they really don't say that to you in seminary. But it is difficult to preach on the resurrection. It's one of the most daunting things I do every year. And somehow it's so important to do that because the church has set up this situation where on the Sundays immediately following Easter Day, we continue to hear resurrection stories. What's so interesting about it is that the disciples were not easily convinced about what they knew this person to be. They knew this person to be dead, and for them to come into that presence at that time was an incredibly difficult understanding for them. They weren't equipped for it. They had to let go of what they knew about death. And that's a very difficult human thing to do. But something new had happened. And they were not of the mind to accept it. Have you ever heard the term paradigm or paradigm shift? It's been used in psychological terms. It's also been used in business and other places because the understanding is that we get so used to thinking in one way that it's very difficult for us to think in another. There are a couple of examples that are used to understand how people get stuck in one paradigm or way of seeing and are unable to see another. One of them is a great story about the Swiss. You know, the Swiss have been so proud of their development of the Swiss watch. Well, perhaps you didn't know that the Swiss also developed the digital watch. They did, but they dismissed it. It was created by the Swiss, but they dismissed it. They thought no one will really be interested in that because they really like the Swiss watches that we make. But there was a company in Japan called Seiko, and they thought this was a really great idea. And so this industry, which had been so wonderfully accepted as the quintessence of what it is to have a watch, lost the leadership role almost overnight. Well, they have managed to come back, haven't they? In some ways, they appeal to those who really have a lot of money, because now they make these incredibly expensive watches. I guess if you can't make it up on quantity, you make it up on price. Another paradigm shift within the human strain is the understanding of the earth, and it used to be believed that the earth was at the center of the universe and the sun revolved around it. And it took Copernicus to convince people that it was different, and Galileo. And we all know that the church, for the longest time, in fact, it wasn't until the 21st century that the church officially made a statement that, by the way, the sun does not revolve around the earth. So you can see how we get stuck in these ways of seeing. We think we know what is possible because of what we know to be true in the present moment. And so the apostles could not comprehend this incredible experience. In my journey, this has been a central focus of my time when I went to seminary. I was 42 years old when I went to seminary. And I was somewhat of a reconstituted Christian at that point. I'd been raised in the Roman Church. I'd gone to Roman Catholic seminary. And after considerable struggles with the church in my 20s and 30s, I had disappeared from Christianity as I knew it. But I had had an awakening. I had had a spiritual encounter, and I was sure that I needed to find another way, and I found myself coming back into the church. And when I went to seminary, I had the opportunity to focus, even though I was in the midst of a lot of study for those 3 years, I had an opportunity to focus my energy in one particular area. And the area I wanted to focus on was the stories around the resurrection and the theology around the resurrection. It's been an incredibly important part of my growth in my faith. In 1999, my wife Linda and I had the opportunity to go to Israel on a pilgrimage. Went to a lot of places. Had incredible experiences everywhere we went. But the place that continues to blow my mind and blew my mind in my heart was when we were in Jerusalem and went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And that's this book that I have. This is one of those, if you know anything about cocktail table books, this is one of those cocktail table books. Very heavy. It's by Rizzoli, which is one of the great publishing houses that makes these wonderful books. This book was a gift by your former rector when Julie was associate priest at St. John's in Canon, where I was rector. And one Christmas she gave me this book. And it was a reminder to me of the place I've been. I'll show you this later if you want to take a look at it. When we were in this amazingly large church, when you get to the various places of the church, because if you take the stations of the cross, from about the 9th or 10th station of the cross, they all occur within the confines of this Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It is built on what is considered to be Golgotha and the quarry that was part of that area where tombs were hewn in the rock. And in the 4th century, when this was recovered, they built this small place within the bigger place that houses or covers what they believe was the tomb where Jesus was laid to rest. And when you go into this place, as you can as a pilgrim, and actually kneel in this spot where they say that Jesus was buried, it's an awesome experience. But as those who will tell you, who go on these pilgrimages, it's our best guess at the truth that this was where Jesus was laid. We aren't certain. We are unsure. But it has been made so holy by the pilgrims who have come there that there's no question in my mind that it awakened my heart to the power and mystery of this story of Jesus' resurrection. So we have to tell the story over and over again because our human condition is such that we will go back to some sense of reason that has to do with what we know now, but not what is possible in Jesus. My experience has led me to believe in resurrection. Not because I saw Jesus in the flesh, but because of what I know in my life, of what I have seen in the lives of others, and how they have touched me in a way that I believe that this could not happen without Jesus rising. So if you have any doubts today, good. You're a human being alive and here. We can't help but face those doubts. That's why we tell the story over and over again. The story of people who couldn't believe it when they saw it. But that had an effect on them that changed their life forever. It's a struggle, especially in a world where we face death, torture, pain, suffering, to proclaim the risen Lord. That's why we come together, to support each other in the struggles of this life, saying in the most difficult of circumstances, as it says in the Book of Common Prayer, even at the grave. Alleluia. Christ is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.